Joining me on the More Than Your Age podcast is the creator and owner of Pinch of Salt Pastries in Grapevine, Texas, Abby Dumont. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me. This is really fun.
I'm excited to have you, Abby. Abby, right now, ladies and gentlemen, is in the back of her pastry shop.
My very unfinished office.
So has a busy day today and is taking time to speak with me today. So I highly appreciate that. Abby, I enjoyed our short conversation that we had when I met you. I guess it was about a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago at your bakery.
Yeah.
My friend Blythe had highly recommended you, and my other friend Amanda, who had worked for you for just a brief stint, told me about Pinch of Salt a couple of years ago. And then so from the information that I heard then to what I've seen now, Pinch of Salt has grown tremendously and has really taken over the gluten-free and allergy-friendly baked goods in the DFW coffee scene and the bakery scene too. So congratulations, for your accomplishments thus far. That's huge.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Before you opened Pinch of Salt, you studied English and considered teaching as a profession. So why was that an initial interest of yours?
Yeah. You mean what I thought was my career path?
Yeah, what you thought was your career path. Yes.
Yeah. Right. So I was actually homeschooled through middle school and high school. So I feel like I got a passion for reading, literature, writing, from my mom, from my family. It was always just something really important to us, something that we did as a family. And my mom was a big part in our education, especially early on, reading novels to us, part of our curriculum, that kind of thing. So I've always loved it. I've always had a knack for, I think, clear communication. And so I thought, what better way to channel that into English? And so I studied English in college. And then I had my minor in education for 7th through 12th grade. So I had intended to have sort of a practical option to teach. And I quickly just found in that space that it wasn't really what I wanted to do. Some of the things that I loved, I wasn't able to do, I felt like, in the teaching space. And I don't know, it just was disorienting for me, and I just wasn't happy. And so what was, intended to sort of just be a practical application for teaching, for English, or I guess for English rather, I had kind of two options. I could go through like journalism, writing, maybe the online space, blogging, I don't know, something like that, or tried teaching. It just wasn't for me. So I guess that's where it started.
Now, when you figured out that teaching wasn't going to be for you, and you thought, okay, well, I could do in the writing space in some capacity. After you graduated, you actually decided to work at a bakery. And so why did you decide to go that route as opposed to trying to find an office job or something that did fit more of your degree?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I don't really know. I was looking for something that I enjoyed. And I think as soon as I realized that the teaching thing wasn't going to be for me, it felt like such a huge, when you're first out of college, it feels like such a huge decision to start applying for jobs for corporate. And that could have been the path that I took. But in the interim period, my husband really encouraged me to look for a job that could bring in some money, that was kind of easy access. And he was like, what do you like to do? And I was like, what a great question. And so he was like, well, you love to bake. Have you ever thought about working in a bakery? Like, that's something you've always loved to do. You do from home. And I thought, I hadn't even thought about it. And so I was connected to someone through a friend who had just recently purchased a bakery in our area. And so I thought, I'll just reach out to her and I'll interview and I'll see if I'm a good fit. And so she really took a chance on me because I had no experience, just a passion for just baking at home. And so, she just took a shot and was like, hey, let's see if this girl really is going to work out. So I got my first baking job, kind of by accident. And then once I started doing it, I just really loved it. And obviously it wasn't like an amazing money. And at the time, we had very little. So we didn't need much either. We had no kids. And so it was just me and Jordan. And so we it worked. It was perfect kind of for the time that I was in. So
Yeah. Now, your husband said that, what do you enjoy doing? You like baking. So were you just doing it for fun at home, or were you giving it as gifts to people? And kind of when did the love of baking
yeah.
and cooking start for you?
Yeah, so it started definitely in my childhood. My mom still bakes. She's an amazing cook and a great baker too. So we've always baked together as a family. So my love for it came definitely from family, and my own kind of interest in it was really just a hobby. Like I've always thought that baking science was kind of interesting. I've always followed like America's Test Kitchen and cooking shows and reading cookbooks as part of to read. I would read cookbooks and just pour over the recipes and pictures, and it was just always a cool hobby of mine. And so, my creativity kind of came out there when I was home, just thinking of new recipes and fun ways to, change up recipes that I had found online with what I had on hand. And so those things were always just sort of, I guess, things I was doing. And so for him to ask if that was something I wanted to do for work was actually kind of like didn't even occur to me. And I don't even know that I was so young. I don't even think I was nervous. I was just like, oh, okay, I'll just try it out and see how it goes. And so, yeah, I just did.
Yeah. Well, and you said, the bakery, this shop, this lady, she took a chance on you. And so when you got hired, was your initial role to be baking as well? Like, was she going to teach you, or were you kind of going to work in the front, like as a cashier?
Yeah,
or
it was kind of an immersive whole thing. Like she basically wasn't a baker herself. She was learning as she had bought this business, which is kind of a little crazy, but
Interesting.
now that I think about it. But she was like, I'm going to figure this out. Like it was back when cupcakes were like the it thing. And so it was a cupcake shop. And so she was learning kind of alongside of us. And it wasn't hard because we were so focused and so limited in what we did at the time when we opened. So it was like, here's the recipes. And I was like, oh, cupcakes. Awesome. And so we kind of, it was a new shop to her, and still small. So we were building up, our kind of client base and stuff. So between me and another baker that was there, a couple of the other girls that were there at the time, we just sort of figured it out. And it was like all in, like, here's how you take orders. Here's how you, prep for the morning. Here's how much time it takes to manage, when you arrive, when we open, how are we going to get X, Y, and Z done? And so we just kind of did it.
Now, when you were there and, just kind of learning everything in those years or that time frame, were you thinking this is going to be like a long-term thing, or were you thinking this is more short-term until I figure out like what it is I really want to do? Or walk us through kind of that season.
Yeah. I think it's sort of a great question because it leads into a lot of my personality and a lot of, I think, what's led me to where I am today. I do everything in the moment, and I don't, not in like a risk taking sense, in like I don't know, I'm very risk averse. And so I am a very comfortable type person. Like I like to do things that are easy for me and natural for me and like kind of what I'm doing. I'm like kind of a in the grind kind of person. So I'm head down. I think about what I'm doing. And so once I started working there and enjoying it, I honestly like didn't even think about like, how long will I be here? What's my upward mobility? Do I think I'd like to open my own shop, or do I think I want to, move on to even more, get more experience, or go to culinary school and actually like, learn more and try to make this a career path. Like I'm not future oriented like that. I'm very present oriented. And so for me, because it was something I enjoyed and something that I was good at, it was like a good fit, I guess. And so I kind of just stayed in that lane. I think eventually it would have, and in some ways it did, management, different things changed, it wasn't that it was always easy or that I was always like, I'm going to stay here forever. This is the best place in the world. But I didn't think like, what's next for me, like immediately at that time. So I don't know if you know much about the Enneagram, but I'm an Enneagram 9. And so with a one wing So I'm very detailed, but I'm also very like pretty like laid back in my approach of life, I guess. So I tend to get in ruts, and sometimes it can be a bad thing and sometimes it can be a good thing. So at the time, it was just what I enjoyed, and I thought, cool, I'll just keep doing this as long as it's serving me and I'm liking it, and it's helping us pay our bills, kind of thing. So yeah, so I wanted to do well, but I didn't necessarily think like, okay, I have to do the next thing.
How long were you there total? Oh, just how many years were you at that bakery?
Yeah, sure. I think it was about 3 years. I'd have to go back to the calendar and think about it, but it was somewhere around there. And kind of what led me into the next step was I had just taken on more responsibility and more management at that position, and so I was really basically like opening and closing the shop every day, and like excited about taking orders and seeing them through. And so at that point, I kind of thought to myself, like, there is more to this. Like, I could do something more than just run this shop for somebody. And the ownership changed over too. So there was a point where I kind of went, like, this isn't like a perfect fit anymore. Like, I feel like I'm kind of growing past this, which sort of led me into the next steps, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and you start in the midst of this too, at some point, you can tell us exactly when you start having your own dietary restrictions that affect the traditional baked goods that you could consume. So what happened here?
Yeah. So we actually, at the bakery I was at, we had a few gluten-free options that we offered. So I had just dipped my toe into that world even before it applied to me, I guess, at the same time as I was kind of coming to this sort of, I guess, crux of change. Yeah. So I was having some like hormonal issues, some just gut issues, really just not feeling well in my body and my day-to-day life. And so I had started working kind of the same crux of this whole transition, feeling like I was ready for kind of the next thing. It had been recommended to me to go gluten-free, to try, more of a whole foods based diet and just really nourishing myself. And so I did. And it was really just a game changer for me. And at that point, I was also, as I was baking, the bakery that I was at had some gluten-free stuff that we did. And so I was a little bit familiar with it. And I immediately started just like finding substitutions for myself and experimenting with recipes and finding that it wasn't actually as hard as I guess maybe you would think to make certain things gluten-free. So I just got kind of the hang of it and was baking for myself at home that way. And my husband at the time was working in coffee and in coffee shops. And he basically, I would go hang out with him when he was working, and there was just never anything. We loved to go to coffee shops all over the place when we would travel and stuff. And I could never then find anything that I could have. It was like, regular muffins, and there was definitely no gluten-free option unless it was like a pre-packaged like granola bar or something really lame. And so I was just really bummed, and I thought, like, this is not that hard. Like, we're making cupcakes and muffins and things gluten-free at the bakery, and I'm making them at home. It seems like there should be like a natural option out there. Somebody should be providing an option for people like me.
Yeah. So when you realize like there should be somebody out there providing good baked goods, because I'm gluten-free as well. And I remember when I first started out, it was rough out there. There was not a lot of good options. Yeah, really bad. Yeah. And so, now you're thinking, okay, you start baking on your own. You're doing stuff for yourself, and you're going to these coffee shops, and you're looking around, and you're like, okay, there's prepackaged stuff. So at what point did you put both of these worlds together? I've been working at a bakery. I can actually bake really good gluten-free items, and now let's actually make something with this. How did that transpire?
Sure. Yeah. So it was a little bit of again, a push for my husband to do something about it, because I kind of need that nudge. And so I first started doing a local farmers market here in Grapevine. And so this is like way back, but I was already in this same area. And I was just like, oh, cool. Like, this is so fun. Let me see if I can run a little booth and sell my stuff. And so I was baking from home for that, selling at the farmers market. And that was so fun, so much work. But it was kind of a hit. Like people were just, at that point, I wasn't even doing just gluten-free. I was doing both. But the gluten-free stuff was like immediately people were drawn to it and they were like, oh my gosh, I can't find this stuff anywhere. And so I pivoted really fast to only doing gluten-free, even at the farmer's market. And then at the same time, as that, we had some friends that were opening up a coffee shop in Grapevine as well called Redefined. And they were looking for somebody to source gluten-free pastries for them. And so I was just connected to them and I was like, what if I could do this? Like, this is crazy. So it sort of started the ball rolling and I started baking just small amounts for them and for one other local shop. And to me, like, it was so cool to get to like make the pumpkin bread or whatever and get money. I was like, this is awesome. And so, yeah, so it grew really like from that place. And so very quickly after that, I ended up leaving the bakery and finding a commercial kitchen space that I could rent so that I could actually do, do it via health department code and all of that and have an actual kitchen to work from. So yeah, so that's where it started. And then we've just been growing since then, growing our wholesale business first, and then now here having a real bakery that people can come to.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, when you did start off at the farmer's market, had you already come up with your name, or was it just like Abby's Baked Goods?
Yeah, I had. I picked Pinch of Salt as our name right about the same time that I started the farmer's market because I needed like some kind of a brand or a thing. And so, yeah, I just kind of workshopped some ideas and thought that was cute. And, the idea of having like every recipe has a pinch of salt, or often they do. And to me, like salt is an integral part of sweet and pastries, especially because it gives that sort of balance of savory and sweet. And so, yeah, it was just I was like, let's do it. Let's stick with it.
Yeah, I love the name. And so, for the listeners, I was living in Grapevine, and so I definitely am familiar with Redefined. It's a very well-known coffee shop that's very successful. And so just the fact that you were friends with the owners of that, and then they were able, like, that was your, outside of the farmer's market, your first wholesale business to just kind of lead you on to starting to where you are now, which I think is really cool. I'm curious to know too, because you had experience of running the previous bakery or helping run it, you were the manager opening and closing. What were some of the skills that you developed there that were able to transfer over into what you're doing now?
Definitely. So it gave me confidence definitely in the actual running of a bakery, like the doing of it, the baking, kind of the organization. What I have learned now, I guess, sort of even looking back, was just a real responsibility. Like in some ways, it was always small business. Like this was a small business that I was working at. I cared about them succeeding and about the customers. And so it was just this sort of ownership, I think, that I carried with me, even though I didn't really realize it because it wasn't my business. So it got me into that small business mindset, which I never thought I would own or run a small business, but it turns out like it's actually a really good fit for me and my passions and my strengths. And so I think it started there. And then as soon as obviously I made it my own thing, it was like, oh, this is mine. Like, this is like, I can do what I want with this and it can be whatever I want it to be. And so that's kind of overwhelming, but it's also, I think, started back then. And even as we were really small, just like that sort of that fire is right there. Like, oh my gosh, this is mine. And this is so exciting.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you decided that you needed to look for a commercial space, what pushed you towards doing that? And then how were you able to find this space? And how were you able to find this space?
It's kind of blurry. Yeah, it's kind of blurry how I found it in the first place. I was just asking around the, connections with people. And the space that we found was used to be a restaurant space, but they had closed off and done the whole front. So it was literally just a kitchen. And so I was able to basically lease it only as I needed at first. And then eventually we took over the full lease on that space ourselves. And so we were sort of co-working at some points, and then it was our full lease. And then we stayed in that space all the way up until January of what year was it? A year ago. So it's basically 2 years ago as of this January. So that'd be 2022. We left that kitchen space in pursuit of building this current space.
And how many years were you at the kitchen space?
We were there between, I think it was about 7 years. Wait, am I even saying that right? I forget if it's 2022. Anyway, yeah, so we were there for a long time because our growth was really slow. Maybe it was more like 5. Time is what? I don't know. But we were growing really slowly for a while. I had actually had another job for a while. I was like managing it. First I was baking, then we had kind of transitioned over to having other people help us. I was working 2 jobs. I had a baby in there, and there was just a lot. So it was very slow. We maintained like a very steady pace for a long time. And only in the last few years did we really ramp up and start growing as I had kind of the capacity to do it. So we were there for a while, kind of just doing, it wasn't that it was boring, but we were keeping things kind of calm for a while. And there wasn't a huge need to grow, but we did eventually really outgrow that space. Like we were on top of each other in there. So so that was what obviously led us to like, we have to find a new place.
Yeah. Well, I think I liked what you said is that, while you were there, that kitchen space, you were working and doing what you were able to do at that specific capacity as what you could in your life season. You were working another job, then you started having kids. And so the progression was slower, but there were all these other things that took precedence over that. I think that's important for people to hear, that it just doesn't have to be like Zoom, that you get to the top or you get like to the point you want to be, that it is slow, it is gradual. And so just a good lesson to learn and to hear as well. Well, so I want to hear too, you mentioned you knew the owners at Redefined, and then you were able to get your baked goods into another coffee shop. How were you able, after those 2 places, how were you able to spread the word regarding Pinch of Salt? And then how were you able to enter the Dallas coffee market with all that?
Yeah. It sort of got to be a little bit of like pitching. So we would send emails to basically cold calls and DMs in Instagram and in connections that we had to other shops that were existing, or we knew that we found out were opening, because the Dallas coffee scene has also just like exploded in the same time frame that we have also grown. And so we attribute a lot of our success. Although there is a demand, obviously, for gluten-free stuff, we still attribute a lot of our success to the fact that coffee shops and the coffee culture is so huge now, everywhere, but especially here. So we would reach out to shops. We got basically a really big deal happened. I got connected with the owner of Summer Moon Coffee in Keller, who owns multiple locations. His name's Greg, and he was interested in carrying our stuff. His wife is gluten-free. And so that was a really big one, because it was multiple locations that we were going to be servicing. And then they open a new shop like every year. And so that was like built-in business. So we really value our partnership with them. We're still partnering with them as well. So it was really just like asking, and then like, lots of times people didn't even answer. Sometimes they'd answer, we'd send them our pricing and our details, and then, we never hear back from them, or like down the line years later, they would reach out. So, it's like people came to us when the time was right, and we were able to partner with other shops like when the time was right for them too.
Yeah, that's a good perspective too. I'm curious to know though, when you're in that position and you're reaching out to all these places and you're not hearing back, how did that affect you as far as, I guess, emotionally, or how did it affect you regarding your business? Did it hurt? Did it help?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah. The reaching out and like either getting a pass or a go wasn't as much like, I guess, super personal for me, but it was more so just making sure that we always had the help that we needed to like achieve the next thing. Because when you're that small, to go from like, we have 2 shops to like we have 5 shops, or then we have 9 shops, every growth was like exponential amount of work, because unlike a storefront or something, when you're baking wholesale, the margins are really thin. And so you're making a lot of something for a low profit. And so it was more like, I was always a little concerned and really, I felt very vulnerable to be like, we have just enough help. If we take on this new shop, it's going to be this much more work. It's going to be a great boost for us, but it's also going to require more management and more product. And it increased, significantly like what we needed to order and how much our purchase orders went up, and, the amount of money that we had to be coming in and out at any given time. So it was more of like a little bit scary for me from like, as we grew, just a management standpoint of like, okay, can we keep doing this? Does this make sense? Like, so there was lessons along the way as we've grown, for sure, from a kind of like money in, money out, true business sense, but also like an emotional sense, in that like I was always trying to take care of my team and make sure we had help, make sure people, they felt supported and had what they needed, as well.
Yeah, that's good. Now, I'm trying to, I feel like when I spoke with Blythe about you and Pinch of Salt, I feel like she shared a story with me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, or share the story that you would go, like you would position yourself in DFW Airport to get customers.
Yes.
Okay, tell us, I want to hear more about that.
Okay, so this was really wild. So while we were growing our wholesale, we got a connection with American Airlines at DFW. They had at the time, they don't even have it anymore because they've since moved into a new, like, bigger location. I don't think they do the same thing anymore, but they had these like local vendor setups where they would have restaurants or like catering companies or like, I don't know, cookie makers, like ice cream makers, like anybody like local that was fun. It would invite them to come and set up in one of their cafeterias and sell like straight to the customer with your own transactions, your pastries or items to them. And so it was just fun. It was sort of like a morale booster, I guess, for their employees, because they had the same options every day. It was kind of boring. And so they'd have these local businesses come in and do it. So I got like a regular gig with them. We would go for a while. It was like every other week, I think. And we did that for a long time. I still have customers that I met there that worked at American that still come to see us. Yeah. That are like, that was the coolest thing. Like, cause a lot of them were gluten-free and they had like no options. They could have like a salad at lunch. And so they were like, yes, it's amazing. We get cookies and like all these things. So yeah, I did that for a time. Eventually it just stopped making sense. It was actually a lot of work to like prepare for it, to go load, unload, work the whole day, afternoon there, and then come back. And so we did that for a while. It was sort of like a pop-up market kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, that's really neat. I never knew that American Airlines did that, or the airport that they did that. And so having you do that too is really neat. Well, okay. So you had, you initially had the commercial kitchen and you were a wholesale bakery. Did you also have outside, like the everyday consumer interested in purchasing your items, and kind of how were you able to manage that?
Yeah, it all came from the people that had our pastries at coffee shops. So like they would be like, oh, this is a Pinch of Salt. I had your coffee cake today or whatever. I was wondering if you make birthday cupcakes, or if you make, I'd like to order full loaves of pumpkin bread, or like a dozen of this or that for my corporate meeting, like, or a family event, or whatever. They wanted to stock up. They were like, hey, if I go straight to the source, can I get what I want, but get more of it? And so it was literally just people finding out about us, calling or emailing me and saying like, hey, I've had your stuff here. Like, is that something that you do that we can come and pick up from you? So people started coming to, basically pre-ordering from us, coming to our kitchen, even though there was no storefront, and just picking their orders up from us. So that was like a little at the beginning, and then it just started to grow.
So eventually, as it started to grow and grow and grow, when did you decide? I mean, I know you told us like time frame, but at what point did you say, okay, this is like, we're getting too big. We've got to really find a storefront. And how did that all play out?
Yeah, it became pretty obvious that was like a huge demand. So I had hired like cake decorators, to expand the types of things we'd offered. And it was really just a volume thing. We just couldn't keep up with the amount that we were doing in the space that we were in. We had bought another oven. We had done everything we could to kind of increase our capacity, but we just like basically hit a wall. And I knew that it was a big choice. It was like, okay, either at that moving point between deciding we were going to start looking for a new space, and then it took us a year between looking for a new space, building out this current space. It was a full like calendar year process. Actually, it was longer than that. It was more like a year and a half between looking, finding the space, building it out. So in that whole time frame, we were making really big decisions, like what, and that was really scary. Like, is this what we want to do with our life? Basically, is all of our money going to go into this? Are we ready to take out a business loan? Are these really, then it was like a snowball of really big decisions all at once. And it was sort of a, like, trust the process, like, know that the, like, success that we've had isn't from nowhere. Like, people really do need us and really do appreciate what we provide. And so to just embrace that and go, okay, like, we're going to take the leap. We're going to open the storefront because we know the demand is there. We hope the demand is there. And then just do it. So it was absolutely the hardest year between when we started looking and then once we decided we're actually for sure doing this. It was a little bit do or die because we would have had to find some other temporary situation if we hadn't decided to do a storefront. I'm not sure that we would have kept going.
Wow. Now, when you did find the place, did you know initially too that you wanted to partner with a coffee shop, or did you just think, no, we're going to just be strictly a bakery?
Yeah, I always wanted to have a coffee shop. As soon as we decided, like, we're going to have a pastry case, a storefront, I was like, it's got to have coffee. It's like the perfect pairing. We knew it would draw in more customers too, just to have a place that they could be. And so that was definitely a part of the type of space we were looking for. And then in terms of partnering with Love Local, who's our coffee provider right now, we were a little apprehensive about doing all of it at once and feeling like we kind of needed to stay in our lane and make sure we could successfully execute all of the bakery side of things. And so we started reaching out to a lot of the people that we know in the coffee space and saying, hey, does anybody want like a second little sublease location that's, low investment for you, but you get to have a second shop? And Sarah at Love Local was like the perfect fit. It was the right time for her and kind of the right level of risk for her. And so, it ended up being like a really good fit. And we're so happy that we have her and that we get to have awesome coffee every day. It's great. We're very spoiled. So it's awesome.
That's nice. Now, as a consumer and someone on the outside, I now going into different coffee shops all over DFW, even though, now I've met you, now I know you, but before, like, I knew Pinch of Salt was gifted a lot of baked goods from you or, from your bakery. And I go to different coffee shops and I see this is from Pinch of Salt, and I get super excited just because it's a local, I have people who got connections and everything. Yeah. And so that is super exciting to see that. And then, you went from farmer's market to Redefine to the commercial kitchen to now you have your storefront. What was it like with the reception? Because I was watching like your social media of we're about to open. And everyone I feel like that I know in Grapevine was talking nonstop about Pinch of Salt cool. Opening. And so leading up to opening day or the launch, like, what were the emotions? What was it like? How did that whole experience transpire and go off for you?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It was so much because we were actually in a temporary kitchen space between our original lease because our lease was up in January and we were still building this space. So it was like not done, not quite done, not quite done, not quite done. And we hit hurdles, just with building out is a mess. And it's so much, there's just so many things that happen that are unexpected. And then you're working with the city and the fire department, and there's just so many boxes to check. Health department, you have to get your, occupancy certification, all these different things. And so we're waiting. We had moved into a temporary space for about 3 months. That was really, really rough because it wasn't really our space. So we were just basically barely making it work and just desperate to get into this kitchen. And so it's a long story really, but the short of it is we were stressed out of our minds, especially Jordan and I, and it was really hard. It just because there are so many things riding on getting in, getting open. Obviously we poured so much money into building and, the loan that that we took out and everything. And so it was just like, oh my gosh, like this has to happen. And so we finally got open in the kitchen side. So we basically were able to get an operational CO for the back where we could work without the front being fully finished. And so we moved in April. We then took between April and September to get front of house staff hired and trained, to finish outfitting the front, and getting the last details and stuff that we needed. So it was a lot of emotions. It was a lot of work. It was really stressful. I feel like we didn't do anything except just live, like eat, sleep, and breathe that process for like at least 6 months. And then once we finally were like gearing up for opening, it was just really, I mean, it was really exciting. I was up here so often. I mean, I was here. We were all just here working nonstop trying to make it happen. And so the first opening day was like, it was really emotional. Like it was like, I felt like the team that I had was so awesome and had worked so hard, like with me to get here. And we were just like, this is really happening. And so, I have videos and pictures and stuff of our team the first morning. And I had like gotten like 3 hours of sleep because I was so anxious and like got there super early. And so it was wild. It was wild. And at the same time, like I felt very confident that people were going to love it. I just was like, it was just a real turning point for me, I think, in my, just like the reality of it hitting and it being like, I'm in this, like this is happening. Because once you open the doors, like you're in it, it's happening. So
yeah, it's go time for sure.
It's go time. Yeah.
And I think being there, like just hearing your story, like I'm envisioning what that was like just right before opening, and then the stress. I can imagine how stressful that was. And then like you knew people would like it, but just the fact that you had a great team working around you as well, and you provide a good product. And it's just, I don't know, it's really exciting to hear you talk about this. And then also to just flashback where you said, like originally kind of at the beginning where you were like, for me, I was never like kind of a long-term thinker. I was more of like, I'm going to do what I'm focusing on now. I'm going to do a good job at it. I'm going to keep doing this. To now you have this amazing company and this beautiful pastry shop with a coffee shop. Like what a huge accomplishment. So I just want to say congratulations again. I think that's awesome. So something I want to kind of ask that kind of is taking us a little back, is I noticed on your video on your website, so you have a video on your website, you stated that you wanted to provide baked goods that could compete with traditional baked goods that carried gluten, which you have done that. And I know that you were like, once you first found out you were gluten-free, you were trying out different things. But what was the trial and error process like to accomplish making really good baked goods?
Yeah. So I kind of have had, it's sort of a long, like there's so many things that I've wanted to do. And especially since we've opened, there's so many things people ask us to do. Like, can you make bread? Can you make pizza crust? Can you make pie crust? Can you make quiche? Can you make sandwiches? Can you, because they need it. They miss it. It's like something that's not accessible still. And if it is, it's in, grocery store quality. It's not always the best. And so they really want to support local people, just like you would if you were, would rather buy your sourdough or something from your neighbor or at a farmer's market than you would just to go to Whole Foods or whatever and pick up a loaf of bread. And so we have that sort of side of things. And so back at the beginning, I kind of was like just sticking to what I knew, which was, more just American style, like classic pastries. We haven't ventured into like croissants or a lot of, I guess, like really fussy stuff. Because at this point, because it does take a lot of time, and every recipe that we do and that we like achieve the end result that we want does take time to think about the concept, work usually from a base of a recipe that we know works, and then kind of work forward from there. Like if we know we can think of a good base for something is really helpful. So that's usually what we do. And that's what we did. That's what I did even back at the beginning, was like, okay, if I want to make a new type of a cupcake or a new type of muffin or something, I would work from a base. And then I'd think like, well, if I wanted to make this vegan and take the eggs out, then what do I need to start with to do that? And then if the batter was dry or it wasn't rising properly, then I would adjust certain things, leavening and dry to wet ratios and things, and tweak. So we still do that. And it's why we wish we could do everything. And eventually maybe we will. But we do have to take it pretty slow because every new thing we do takes a lot of effort. And also the response is usually really great. And so it's like, we can't promise croissants, just as an example, whatever. We can't promise it unless we can make it to the scale that people really want to purchase it from us. So yeah, it's a little bit of a delicate balance, and I wish sometimes that we could do more. And then I have to remind myself, like, no, you're doing a lot. It's a lot. So, but in terms of the recipes, it does take work. It takes tweaking and fine tuning and to get it the way that we want.
Yeah, there's a special science to it to make something, like you said, with the tweaking, to make something really taste good and make it to where the consumers feel like, hey, this actually tastes like if it were not gluten free. My husband all the time, he's like, oh no, that's definitely that cake definitely tastes gluten free.
Yeah. There is a definite difference if you don't nail it. So
there is. Now, Abby, when you first started your business, back to the market. What am I thinking? Farmer's market. I was like losing my train of thought.
Yeah.
So when you think of like back to the farmer's market, to owning the commercial space, to where you're like, no, I'm actually going to start this business. Did your age or your season in life ever play a role in your pursuit of the business?
My season of life definitely did. I don't think my age really did, but my season of life definitely did along the way. Like I mentioned, having one baby early on, and then we have a second now that we had. She's 2.5 now. So kind of at the beginning of the transition of doing all these big changes was like right after I had her and was kind of recovered from being a brand new mom and all of that. So definitely my season of life did. I felt like my bandwidth was really limited in those seasons, and I sort of had to just accept that, which is hard. But I think overall, like, we had a good thing going, and so it was just maintaining it and sort of trying to just accept those seasons as kind of for what they were. And I'll be the first to say that, like, it wasn't just like a straight path. It really wasn't. It felt like we did have a good thing going that was really steady, but along the way, our own home life, personal life, was always intertwined with it because it was just our business. And so, so I was always considering, like, what we needed financially and what our family needed, and if we wanted to have another kid, and if we wanted to, how I could balance being a mom and also doing, working, and Jordan also working and trying to help me and help us run the business. And so there was a lot of factors. And I think, along the way, I cried a lot about feeling like I couldn't be as present for the business as I wanted, or be as present for my family as I wanted in different seasons. This really ebbed and flowed.
And when you've done, when you were kind of going through those different emotions, what were you able to do to kind of like work through those emotions and to focus on what needed to be focused on at those specific moments?
Yeah. I really relied on my family a lot. I'm super grateful that I have a good support system. My family lives in the area too, so they were able to help a lot. Just carry my own, and my husband too, just carry some of the weight of my emotions, my the parts that were really hard for me. I really leaned on them a lot, and on God too. I mean, having a greater purpose, having, knowing that I was kind of held, and feeling that I was held kind of through those seasons was really good, and kind of finding my value. And my purpose was not just in what I could achieve or what I could do, with the business, was always kind of my anchor. I would go back to that and feeling like it's okay. Like, if you can't be everything to everyone right now, like, that's not really why you're here anyway. And so, yeah, it was humbling along the way. And because this has been a 10-year process. And so I've gone from being 20 something to 30 something. And there's a big difference between being, young in your early 20s and feeling like everything's limitless, like you can do anything you want, to being like, I have responsibilities. I want to have a real, like, purpose, and, like, that maturity that comes with experience and with hardship. And so I'm a very different person in a lot of ways than I was when I started also.
Yeah, I bet. And I like how you said too, just realizing that your value isn't in either being a business owner, running a bakery, or my value is in being a mom, there's a greater purpose in all of that. And also kind of like going back to what you said a while ago, that it took, it was a specific season and you were doing work and it didn't take off immediately, which was good because you probably wouldn't have been able to handle it at that time. And it was slower, and that's what it needed to be in that specific season. And so I think that's just a good lesson to learn. Well, Abby, I have my last question I want to ask you, which is a question that I ask all of my guests. And so I want to hear from you. So if you could encourage one woman who feels blocked or limited to pursue a dream or goal based on her age or her life circumstance, what would you tell her?
I would say to really embrace the small steps, because I think people assume that doing something that you love requires, kind of like you were saying earlier, like a full send. Like, I have to be all in on this. Otherwise, I can't commit, right? Or I know I'm not able to do that because of my family or whatever, my time, all the things that we all have in common, just busy lives and limitations, coming kind of, it feels like from everywhere. Like, I'm limited with something, some resources limited. And just to embrace the small steps that you can make towards doing the thing that you love to do, or doing the thing that you're passionate about. Because for me, it was lots and lots and lots of tiny little steps that led me kind of to where I am today. And I think also I would say to really rely on other people as best as you can, to help you get there. Like, we all need help. And so I've had to ask for more help than I ever would have thought, between my team, prayers from friends, meals, watch my kids, asking for help, and finding a way to include other people in your journey of wherever you're trying to go, is huge, because we can't do anything alone. And I certainly haven't done this alone. So those are the two biggest things for me.
Yeah, I like how you said to ask for help, to make sure that you're
something for the freezer.
That's okay. What I was going to say is I just like how you said that it's important to ask for help, because it's really hard to ask for help, and it takes a lot of humility to do that, to say, okay, I need this, and the saying, it really takes a village. And so being able to do that, I think that's a good just reminder for myself as well, and I know it will be for the listeners. Well, Abby, I know we can find you at Pinch of Salt on Instagram, and I'll put your website in the show notes as well, so people can find you, especially local folks to DFW. Abby Dumont, thank you so much for joining me today on the More Than Your Age podcast. This was a treat.
I'm so honored to have been invited, and to be here, and to tell my story. This has been really cool. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.